Hello, everyone, and welcome to the 23rd part of the Q&A within the lecture series True Dhamma, following in the footsteps of the Buddha. Today, Saif and I will answer additional questions that you have brought to us via various different media, for example, email, Discord, or the YouTube comment section. So feel free to use those to reach out to us. Then we will answer your question, unless it has been answered multiple times before. But yeah, without further ado, let us just begin with the first question. This one is a bit long, so maybe we can repeat it in simple words before answering it. Would you say that thinking and pondering in regards to jhana could be described as reflection upon a present theme or state? For example, from the point of view of a mind blameless in regard to virtue, recognizing this mind is blameless, which is peaceful or joyful, and that reflection gives rise, cultivates, arises with the other jhana factors, resulting in jhana. I cannot remember which who starts.
This is yours.
Okay. Yeah. So what does this person wants to know? First of all, yes, you could interpret jhana, especially the first jhana, as a type of thinking and pondering the Dhamma. You think about the teachings in a special way, so to speak. You use your inner voice, your inner monologue, to clarify and ponder on the teachings even further. So, contrary to very popular beliefs that there are only wispy thoughts or something like that, the first jhana actually has or can have quite a lot of mental talk going on, quite a bit of clarifying, reflecting on present themes and arisen states. It's also usually what the thoughts revolve around. You explain the Dhamma to yourself further. You try to clarify it, you drill it in. And when you have achieved a certain degree of blamelessness, you have a very strong virtue, strong restraint, and recognize the joy of that, then this can take you further. Well, if you have already attained the jhana, it can take you deeper into the jhana, but it is at least a precondition to entering the first jhana. So you really must be quite secluded from sensual pleasures, quite secluded from all the unwholesome states, and then the jhana arises. You must abandon all the hindrances, and the result of that is the jhana. And yeah. But yeah, even before jhana, reflecting on all of that and cultivating all those themes further, trying to restrain even more, trying to see the drawback in sensuality, trying to cultivate the blamelessness and everything that will lead to jhana ultimately. It will help you abandon the hindrances, as we have said in the last video, in the 4 right exertions, so to speak. Whenever you can, try to prepare the mind so that unarisen, unwholesome qualities can no longer arise, and unarisen, wholesome qualities will arise in the future. So you really want to uproot your dependency on sensuality, so to speak. I hope I understood that question correctly. It's always a bit difficult with the long ones. Maybe you can give it another go.
Yeah, sounds good. Yeah, contemplation is very much necessary, especially for jhana. You need to, as it says in the suttas, you need to have already understood the danger of sensual pleasures to enter jhana, because that's why jhana is peaceful. It's because you see sensual pleasures as dangerous and you don't want to return to it. That's why you can sort of rest in it. And to do that, like, yeah, you need to have contemplated the danger of sensuality and the blamelessness of virtue and so on. Very necessary. The only thing I would probably say in regards to like actively thinking and pondering and actively reflecting for jhana is just to be aware of the possibility that you're doing it out of restlessness, which would be within the hindrances. Because it can be that you're like, yeah, you're pretty calm, you're not engaged with sensuality, you're by yourself, no company, watchfulness of your intentions, but then like you're still sort of a bit restless. You're still waiting for the peace to emerge, and then you might try to start thinking about your experience in order to get the peace to come, and that would be within the hindrances rather than outside of it. So it's more towards the element of non-activity than activity. You would be surprised by how much you don't need to actively think and ponder for that thinking and pondering to accurately emerge. Like in that sutta about which compares the purifying the mind to purifying gold. It says that you give up the unwholesome conduct, you give up the thoughts of sensuality, thoughts of ill will, you give up the subtle thoughts of longing towards home, longing, not wanting to be despised by others. And then it says, when you've given up all that will remain is thoughts about the Dhamma. So you realize you didn't have to actively think about it. You realize that the only reason you're not thinking thoughts about the Dhamma, the only reason you're not reflecting upon your present state is because your mind is affected by lust, aversion, delusion. It's because your mind has been taken elsewhere. It's thinking about the next, distraction, the next pleasure, whatever it is. It's been taken away. But once you take that away, you'll just be left with your experience, and then reflection on the present theme will just it'll automatically emerge. Especially if your mind's been like trained in advanced contemplation, listening to Dhamma talks, starting to think about the right themes. And I would even say that like it needs to be, you need to see how those thoughts can arise without your need to do it. Because the whole point of the jhana is that it's a genuinely peaceful state. It's not being held together. It's not something that you have to actively, vigilantly keep together. It's just genuinely like this. The mind's like in a calm sort of station where it just doesn't move anymore. And to do that, you sort of have to let you have to stop keeping your thoughts together by having this constant vigilance of like, I'm not going to let any sensual thoughts in. You can sort of let your thoughts roam free, so to speak, because you have trained your mind to give up the sensual thoughts. Now I can let my mind roam free, do whatever it wants, and I can be peaceful within that, because I know that thinking and pondering is not going to go beyond the realm of Dhamma into the sensual thoughts. And you're only going to do that really if you allow the thinking to happen by itself, and you're not like actively sort of keeping your mind together, thinking about Dhamma sort of thing. So yeah, those are some thoughts you can also think about in terms of actually really getting the correct thinking and pondering in regards to jhana.
It has to be effortless. Otherwise the state would not be peaceful. So, and
Yeah.
it's only peaceful when the thoughts are thinking themselves. Detached thinking, so to speak. You are no longer in the center of those thoughts. Yeah. One thing I would like to add is when you have attained the vision of the Dhamma I think the Buddha called it in some suttas, in a feeble way, which is possible. When your prior training of the mind has not been too good, and you have not been living very restrained and everything like that, then I would be cautious not to let the mind roam too freely in the beginning. When you have attained the right view in such a state of turmoil, as an example, because it can be a catalyst for understanding it when there is great suffering, then you have to do the restraint a bit later. The person who has done the prior training has a much easier time in that regard. You cannot avoid the restraint. It happens later. Optimally, that happens before, but when the circumstances allow for the right view to arise a bit earlier, then you have to do the restraint later on. It cannot be avoided. Only then can you enter jhana stably, so to speak. Otherwise, it will always be feeble. You fall in and out of it, and it's not good. Yeah. Anything else?
Yeah, I mean, it's just as you say, that restraint needs to be in place beforehand, and yeah, pretty deeply as well. Like in that purifying goal sutta beforehand, even when they get to they've restrained enough so that only Dhamma thoughts are present now. Even that in the sutta is not yet jhana. It's still not peaceful. It's still sort of kept in check. It's still within the domain of restraint. So you see how far the restraint have to go. And then it's only once that restraint is there, once only Dhamma thoughts are left, then you can start to let go a bit. But before then, you really do have to tie the elephant down and wait till it calms down. Yeah.
While there is a somewhat strict order, sometimes there can be deviations from it. but the restraint has to come first. This is undebatable, at least for before you enter jhana. There is no avoiding in that. So if you always radiate back towards sensuality, then tighten that. Anyway, let us come to the next question. And this one is surprisingly short. The person in question wants to know, does anyone have some tips for sloth and torpor? It is a very tricky hindrance. Yeah, that's for you.
Okay. I'll be very quick with this one. I mean, main thing is that sutta, I can't remember where it is at the top of my head, but it's called like nodding off or
Nodding
something.
off.
Which,
yeah.
Yeah, it gives like, a couple of different things you can try if you're starting to get tired, fatigued, whatever. Things, it can range from just like actively thinking about Dhamma to like getting up, taking a walk, or like splashing water on your face. Things like that. Very practical tips that you can do. But I would also say you can have a kind of shift of mindset in regards to sloth and torpor, which might help, which is to think about it in terms of debt in the same way that you do for sensuality. If you've been engaging in sensuality for a long time, you have accrued a lot of debt in regards to sloth and torpor. And in that sense, it doesn't really matter how much you try to give it up. Once you give up sensuality, you will be within the domain of sloth and torpor for a while. It's just that's the effect of having engaged with sensuality. Your mind has become dull as a result, and you need a way for it to heal, not on the level of like one session, but over a long period of time. You need to just let it heal. And in that sense, it's fine if your mind is dull for a while, if your mind is under the effect of sloth and torpor. If you're starting to get really tired and so on, you need to take more naps as a result of you giving up distraction and sensuality. All that matters at that point, at the beginning, is that you don't go back to sensuality on account of that. And then over time, your mind will heal. And even like after a week or so, you might realize like for a day or two now, your mind is very bright. It's very, very bright, very active, very energetic. And then after 2 more days, it'll go back to being full of sloth and torpor. And you realize this variance, it's the debt. It's just because the mind has been quite wild for a long time. And you just need among that variance, among that shifting, just make sure you don't give into sensuality again, thinking that that's going to solve the problem, even though that's why it's like this in the first place. And then over time, the mind will equalize and your mind will become more bright and energetic. So that's another thing I would say. Yeah, don't think of it in terms of one session, but over terms of a longer domain that you've entered and that you've accrued debt in regards to it.
Yeah, the only reason the mind is not energetic is literally prior engagement in sensuality. You can observe this quite a lot in people and very likely also in yourself. It's quite evident. You can just see and try for a while. Stay away from sensuality and you will be surprised how energetic you can be after like 2 weeks if you can make it that far. That's a drastic shift even. So that is the direct condition for being energized, so to speak. And the Buddha also said so. And for example, the simile of training an elephant, I think. First, you restrain the wild behavior, the sensual behavior, and then the elephant gets lazy, just lies down and wants to do nothing. And it is the same with his mind that you try to tame, which is why the Buddha kind of chose that simile. And only after that, after you have also sit through that, the elephant will take food and the mind will take your hints and it becomes more malleable and more willing to do what you say. So you really make it obey and instead of allowing it to roam free. And it really is important not to give in, because as soon as it gets a taste again of its old habits, it will be right back there and you have to go through the process of withdrawal again. This time you know what to do, but it's still very hard. So I would try to avoid that whenever possible.
Yeah.
And all the other things are just... Oh, sorry. Yeah, please go ahead.
No, I was going to say, it's because it takes so long to get out of this rut as well. That's why when you do get that pleasure of actually escaping the hindrances on that like really large level, that's why engaging in that pleasure of renunciation is a basis for you not being able to go back, because you realize now how long you had to take to heal the mind, and that difference between the healed mind and the domain you were in before is just so apparent, so incredibly apparent, more so than any sort of session-based pleasure will ever be able to show for you. Even if during one session of meditation you get like the most incredible, bright, pleasurable mind, it's not going to be as different to the normal mind compared to giving up the hindrances on that larger domain that takes a long time to heal from. Yeah.
It's also one of the...
Sorry for interrupting, by the way.
No problem. That's also one of the images the Buddha used quite often. Healing. It's you just remove. You don't treat your wound in any unsuitable way, and it will heal by itself. But healing takes long. It takes weeks or months sometimes, depending on the injury that you have incurred on yourself. It really is not.
Yeah.
I do a healing session or a quick one. It's there's a process that happens by itself as long as you remove all the obstacles for it.
Yeah. I think one of your videos is literally called like "There's no quick fix" in regards to Dhamma, and it's very true. And it makes it more difficult at the beginning, but it makes the results so much more better and pleasurable. And yeah,
it very much goes against the grain of many modern beliefs and many modern meditation techniques, even of many established teachers that I think have gotten the core ideas right, but they stick to certain traditions. I'm not sure why. It seems like a, let's say, flag bearer thing. If you have grown up in a certain tradition, it very likely is a bit like you have to keep it alive or something like that, and visit all the rituals and everything. But I'm only guessing here. I don't really know why they do that. But anyway, I think that's enough on that question. And let's move to the next one. Another short one. And the person wants to know, what does it mean to see your own mind as one of the requirements for Sottapati? That the mind cannot be attended directly with your own five senses. This is a question that many people bring up quite often. They do not understand. If you have to see your own mind, they are used to only, seeing things from afar. So they want to see the mind in the same way that they see any other thing in the world. So they assume an external viewpoint to the mind and try to see it like that. And I think the Buddha gave a simile to explain how to see correctly in that way. I think he compared, he brought up the image of a king and a cook, and he explained that a cook, if he is skilled, will prepare all kinds of meals for the king, and he will observe what the king does, what kinds of food the king chooses and eats a lot of. So the cook can learn about the preferences of the king without even asking. He's inferring, so to speak, from the behavior that he is observing. And in the same way, you can start to learn the patterns of your mind so that you can start seeing your mind, your own mind, as an arisen thing. It's not something that you are doing, something that you should not be identified with, where the identification and all the ownership is more or less gratuitous, that you don't have to do that. And yeah, it takes quite a bit of training. And without seeing the mind as an arisen thing, there is no Sottapati, simply because it's a spotless vision of the Dhamma. You also have to include that, and it's very likely the most subtle part. Your actions and words and everything are much easier to see than the mind. I hope I've covered everything. Maybe you give it a go.
Yeah, I mean, everything you said was very much on the money. The only thing I could add is like if you're at the beginning of the practice and you want like very practical instructions, like seeing your own mind, basically just you can think of it also as just like seeing your intentions of lust, aversion, delusion, fundamentally, or lust, aversion, distraction. If you want to be even more practical, which is why it's a requirement of Sottapati. Because what is Sottapati? It's understanding the Four Noble Truths. First, understanding the Four Noble Truths. It's understanding craving and the cessation of craving. Seeing your own mind, seeing the craving. That's a requirement for Sottapati. And it's definitely not the case that we already see craving and we already see suffering, which is what some people might think reading the Four Noble Truths. Like, yeah, I already know the the first Noble Truth at least. That there is suffering. but you don't yet see it in the way the Buddha's talking about it, and that's why you don't understand its cessation. So you don't know lust, aversion, and distraction, and you need to do the work of figuring out where it actually is. And a lot of people can end up practicing meditation for years, not even realizing, like, for example, that they practice in meditation out of intentions of restlessness, out of distraction, or even simply for sensual reasons. And the only reason you wouldn't see that is because you haven't done that prior work of actually just main practice being developing awareness of intentions. Okay, how can you give up the craving of distraction if you don't even see when you're distracting yourself and you always cover it up? You distract yourself, you're like, no, it's fine, it's fine. Yeah, you have to do the work of uncovering it, seeing your own mind. And yeah, as you do that, you start to see what Klaus is talking about as well, in terms of seeing it as an entity, not your own, because that's what lust, aversion, and delusion is. It's the mind reacting on its own without your control, resisting you, and so on.
I think sometimes it's difficult because the Buddha used so many, let's say, equivalent formulations of certain things. So, for example, the Buddha said that you are independent of a teacher when you have attained Sotapadhi. And that is an equivalent way of saying that you have understood the Four Noble Truths. Because when you have understood them, then you don't need a teacher anymore because you have understood. And in the same way, many of the other formulations, like the prerequisites, are just taken one step further, so to speak, but essentially mean the very same thing, and that can be confusing. And in the beginning, when you start reading the suttas, you read lots of different formulations and don't yet have the mapping that they are all pointing towards the very same thing. And you start thinking, okay, this seeing the signs of your own mind, that is something completely different that I also have to get right, not seeing that it's the very same thing. In the end, always about redivision and distraction. So yeah, you learn to see those, and you will see your own mind, and you will see rightly in the end. Yeah, I think that's all that can really be said about that topic.
Yeah.
Yeah, let's move to the next question. And the question of middle length, and the person wants to know. Maybe I just answered that question in advance. Countless words and ideas seem to point to the same ideas in the suttas. Are, for example, sankharas, nature, womb attention, and all those things the same? Are there other things that are also the same in quotation marks? Is it my turn? Is it yours?
I think it's mine, but I guess you kind of vaguely already answered it.
Maybe make it explicit.
Yeah, I mean, the main thing is that basically, yes, most things in the suttas and even across different suttas, they're normally just saying the exact same thing in different ways. And this is something you also want to start to see in your practice, because this is fundamentally what the right view is about. The right view is about seeing what is the essence of the practice. That's how Sariputta defined it in the right view sutta. Like, what is the root of the wholesome? What is the root of the unwholesome? What is common ground between all wholesome qualities? And that's why for the Sotapanna, they don't need to think about, oh, this is my right effort, this is my right mindfulness, and this is my right concentration. No, all they have to remember is their right view, because that contains the essence of the practice within it. And so you realize, okay, well, what is the right view? We've already said it's the Four Noble Truths, but a more useful formulation here, it's understanding dependent origination. That's the essence of everything in the practice. Absolutely everything is contained within understanding dependent origination. And so that's when you're practicing, you have to do gradual training. First, develop restraint, develop wakefulness, moderation, eating, planning sensuality, developing jhana. But then you want to see how all of that is contained within seeing dependent origination. Because if you see, for example, that your entirety of your experience is undermined by this body that you don't own, your sense of ownership, your sense of self would fade in regards to it. Your sense of self fades in regards to it. Craving cannot appear anymore. And that's the essence of the Four Noble Truths. So you realize everything is completely and utterly contained within that. And sankharas, same thing. Sankharas is going towards the conditions of your experience, dependent origination. Womb attention, again, going towards the condition of your experience. Nature, that's the things that are common to all of your experience, which are the characteristics of impermanence, of dukkha, of not self, which again you see through seeing the conditions of your experience. Seven factors of awakening, again, you see all of them through seeing dependent origination. Five faculties, dependent origination. Noble Eightfold Path, dependent origination. It's all contained within that. That's why the Buddha said, you see the dependent origination, you see the Dhamma. And all the various different formulations are just seeing different aspects of dependent origination and the practice involved in seeing it accurately and the results of it. And some people might like Seven Factors of Awakening formulation more. Some people might like the Noble Eightfold Path more. Some people might like the three trainings more. Yeah, people have different things they like more, but fundamentally they're all seeing the same thing. And that's what you want to start to see for yourself, the commonality between them all.
Mm-hmm. No, I don't think I have much to add there. That's kind of it. I mean, we could repeat that for many of the other different words, but yeah, I think it's not really necessary. You can just look in the suttas and try to map and figure out, okay, what is this related to? Where does it match? What is it likely a synonym for? It can be very helpful. And I did a lot of sorting like that in the beginning because I was very confused when I started. Because some of the translations and also some of my own wrong views made it sound like very different things. And it took some time until it all fell into place. And I started to realize that, okay, all those things are kind of similar. Yeah. Anyway, do we have more time for another question?
Yeah. I was going to say as well for this question, it's also like it makes the practice easier at some point as well. Because at the beginning, you have to see so many different things and have control of your moderating eating and then the wholesome conduct and the restraint and then jhana. But at some point, like your practice just becomes simple because of this, because you see the essence of it. And that's how you can really calm down and things become easy, pretty much. So there's practical import there as well.
I think it's kind of the same with getting good at pretty much everything. In the beginning, everything seems simple and I just have to do the meditation. Then there is a blow up of complexity. Suddenly there are so many things that you do not know. And in the end, it gets very simple again as you have understood the essence of it all. Then it really becomes easy. As I said. Well, and meditation is no exception there because you learn meditation, you learn the Dhamma with the same mind as you learn everything else with. Kind of follows the same patterns. Yeah, okay. Then let's move to the next question. Okay, a short one. The question is as follows. Is Metta spread or radiated in the suttas? And I'm not sure if the question is too easy to answer because some of the formulations in the suttas seem to suggest that. When the Buddha, for example, says that, I think that is from the Metta Sutta, that you want to make sure that there is no ill will to the north, to the south, to the east, to the west, up, down, everywhere. There should not be ill will towards the entirety of your experience. That's how I like to phrase it, that you want to purify your mind of ill will. And you really want to make sure that there is nothing where any ill will can be hidden. And when you look at, for example, the Pali, that is underlying all of that spreading, then the literal translation is usually something like, you should cultivate intentions or a mind of metta or non-ill will. Whenever you encounter some radiating or some spreading or something like that, is usually the Pali that says, cultivate intentions or a mind of metta, non-ill will. That is oftentimes quite freely translated because oftentimes it's part of verses and stanzas. And there's maybe some poetic freedom, but I'm only guessing here. I don't know why they translate the way they translate. But yeah, in a way you are spreading, I guess, which makes it difficult to argue against that interpretation sometimes. but in another way that I find more pragmatic. You're just making sure that there is no ill will, and that no ill will can arise. In some sense, you could say that metta is a bit akin to the first jhana, just with a different vehicle to get there. So it's also a state without craving, but attained through non-ill will and not through non-lust. Yeah. Maybe you had some insight on the topic.
Yeah, I guess you could say like that is a form of spreading or radiating. So it kind of depends on how you understand it, because like Brahma Viharas fundamentally are about developing an like sort of infinite mind. Every concentration kind of is. It's about developing a mind that's not it doesn't encounter any resistance in the world. It's not limited by anything. It's not encumbered by anything. And that's felt even like just at the level of feeling, it's felt infinitely. It's felt like a mind that's just wide, open, broad. So you can think of it in spreading in that way, but that's obviously very different from how it's thought about in contemporary traditions in terms of like spreading this feeling, spreading this perception. Because that can feel infinite, but like by virtue of just being a feeling or just being a perceiving or a perception, by that by that reason, it's not infinite. It's finite. Because it's a feeling. All feeling is finite. And that's why it doesn't, even though it feels infinite, usually, the metta kind of fades pretty quickly, if not after a day, even if it lasts like a few months at a time. In the long view of samsara, that is very, very, very finite. And it's definitely not the dwelling of Brahma, pretty much. So if you want to develop the radiated infinite mind, it's basically what Klaus was saying in terms of not giving in into intentions of ill will and developing contemplation of what is the root of ill will and uprooting that root. Because when there is no ill will present, when ill will cannot arise, no matter what you encounter in the world, then that is exactly that infinite mind, the mind there's no resistance to it anywhere. And yeah, that's known as infinite. You know that it cannot be resisted anywhere. And you see how lofty that is, the mind of Brahma, the dwelling of Brahma. So yeah, that's pretty much it.
I think in some sutta, the Buddha called craving a maker of limits. And
Yeah.
so when you remove craving, then the mind becomes limitless or boundless, so to speak. Because everything is kind of included. Everything is not touching you. Nothing is a hindrance. Nothing is resisting. And yeah, so all practices that lead to the ending of craving also lead to boundlessness, so to speak. And yeah, kind of it.
Yeah, that's why even like even if you want to practice metta, you still have to do like sense straight, because like if you're still engaging with sensuality, there is that resistance that limits the limited mind there. So you can't have a limitless mind and engage with sensuality. That's why like even in the Metta Sutra, it talks about abandoning sensual pleasures and so on, and why like metta is a vehicle for Sautapati and higher, because it's all sort of the same thing, abandoning craving.
I think one more remark on the very positive formulation that people sometimes use when it comes to metta. I think in the Dhammapada it is said that hatred can only be overcome by non-hatred. And that it cannot be overcome by love, as an example. So I think it's suitable to think about metta in that way, and not in a too positive way, like active love or anything like that. Because that is very misleading. Usually the negative formulations, as in removing certain obstacles of the mind, are less prone to error. It's far more difficult to do that wrong. You can hallucinate certain things. I like that word. You can hallucinate certain things in various different ways when you actively try to do something or attain something. But when you just try to stop certain things, I mean, you can hallucinate it not being there anymore, but that's the only way in which it can really go wrong. And then someone can nudge you to the point, yeah, it's still there. Maybe try doing it less. So, yeah. Anyway, anything else on that question?
Yeah, I guess you could emphasize that it doesn't mean that there is no positivity. It's not like a blank state. Like like we mentioned before, it is because of the boundlessness, because of the infinity. That is the positivity of it. And like it is said in the sutta, it is experienced as like, oh, there is this mind of kindness, of non-ill will, that spreads throughout the entire universe. So it is felt positively, but as a result of giving up those obstacles of the mind, and not as a result of your positive spreading, which is, like we mentioned before, that's always going to be finite because it's just a particular feeling, particular sensation. And yeah, it's the same thing also with like the formless liberations, which are sometimes talked about in terms of like feeling the spaciousness of the mind. Well, that's pretty finite as well. But I guess that's moving away from this topic. But it is important because all concentration is a form of a boundless mind, basically.
It just removes the limits. It removes the craving. Anyway,
Yeah.
I think that is enough for that question, and I think we are running again out of recording time. I think this is a good point to stop for today's video. I think we are close to 40 minutes in now. If you have any additional questions on any of the topics that we have discussed here today, feel free to let us know in the comment section. We very much welcome follow-up questions if some things remain unclear. You can also join the Dhamma Discord server to enter a community of like-minded practitioners that hopefully blend like milk and water. Apart from that, yeah, I think I wish you all a pleasant day and maybe until next time. Bye.